Welcome back to the Craftsman Online Podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, Editor-in-Chief of CraftsmanOnline.com, and I'm very excited to have our two guests on for this episode, Most Worshipful Shaun Bradshaw and Worshipful Brother Benjamin Wallace. Brothers, welcome to the podcast.
Good evening. It's good to be with you.
Thank you, Michael.
This is always fun here in the beginning when we get to the Masonic bios, and unlike your book, I'm going to do it just out of respect, but Most Worshipful Shaun Bradshaw is the past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina from 2020, and Worshipful Brother Benjamin Wallace is the past Master of Blackmer Lodge number 127 in Mount Gilead, North Carolina. They're both the co-authors of A Path to Providence, the creation of the Middle Chamber program. You're going to find the link to be able to get that book in the show notes for this episode. But we've invited them on for our discussion on Masonic education. And what's interesting is that it's such an important focus of Freemasonry, I think, early on in the process when you have an interested gentleman who comes to the lodge and then goes through that first degree and becomes an entered apprentice. And then, unfortunately, there's kind of that drop-off that happens after the third degree when you're raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. And both of you brothers have noticed that and gone through your own experiences. So I'd like just for our listener to get a sense of where the idea came up to write a book to convey this message or carry on this conversation.
Michael, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to both promote the book and, more importantly, the idea behind the book. So the concept for the book came, of course, out of the program. The program started probably when this started. Most Worshipful Brother Bradshaw was probably the junior Grand Warden for North Carolina. I was the chair of the Education Committee. And so we cobbled together the program, and we knew that we needed some sort of a Grand Lodge representation to get the program really launched. And so because of both our friendship and the fact that I knew Most Worshipful Brother Bradshaw, Right Worshipful at the time, to be a really esoteric guy, we got him to be what we called our patron, which initially was somewhat of kind of an overseer, group leader. He wasn't really as involved in the day-to-day stuff, but he was the guy that had our back with the Grand Lodge. And as he progressed through the chairs and as the program developed more and more, and he wound up elevating to the Grand East, there came a time when he was about to go into the Grand East when he and I started discussing a book. He initially, I thought that he should write it. Just because of the gravitas that comes with the title of Most Worshipful, which is important. And he thought that I should write it because I was on it from the very ground floor and knew it at the grassroots level. And so I let him finish out the story, how we wound up writing it together, but I started it and we finished it collectively.
The story behind the story is part of the book. And as Ben said, he approached me about writing the story. I thought it was an important story to get out to the craft because we recognized that we had something special with this particular program. It was already just, I think at the time, 2 or 3 years old. It had already gone well beyond our expectations in terms of how popular it was with the craft, the number of brethren that joined and wanted to participate in that program. But knowing that I was going to be Grand Master soon, I just didn't feel like I would have the time to put into the book. But through a subsequent part or a retreat associated with the Middle Chamber, which we call the Inner Chamber, I came to understand that my input would be very important to this story. And as it turned out, of course, COVID came about in 2020. So I had considerably more time than I anticipated, and which was a good thing because putting a book together takes a lot of effort, as we came to learn.
It's interesting. I've had conversations with worshipful brothers who were sitting in the East during COVID, and it was kind of a year that was almost taken from them. I can only imagine what it felt to be in the Grand East during that time, but it's awesome to see that you were productive with this. I do want to get into more of the story of the book and, of course, the Middle Chamber program, which was the offering that you have and the explanation on how it can be useful for Masonic education, not just in your jurisdiction in North Carolina, but hopefully here in New York State, where we're based, and around the world. But I want to knock down two things right away, which just amaze me. First of all, I'm sure for anybody listening to the podcast, you're probably thinking, okay, so they have a past Grand Master on. He must be old. And they have another worshipful master on, and they're having a conversation about esotericism. And it's just not something that I think a lot of brothers are used to expecting from brothers that make their way up to those positions in a lodge. Usually the brother that has a conversation with you, or at least in my experience, is kind of the quiet, more reserved type that is not the extrovert, the outgoing brother in the lodge. So I can say, because I can see them here in our conversation during our interview, Grandmaster Shaun Bradshaw is not an older gentleman, and worshipful brother Benjamin Wallace is a guy that's probably about my age and about his mid-40s. And
older, 54.
Yeah. You look good for your age, Ben.
What I wanted to get to is that just that alone, when I picked up the book and started reading through, I was like, I want to meet these guys, because I don't come across a lot of brothers in leadership roles that embrace this aspect of the craft. Usually in those roles, you have to take on other parts when it comes to like the management of a lodge or a grand lodge. So what was the esoteric connection that the both of you had, and how did you feel that you could bring that to a wider audience through this book?
Before becoming a Freemason, I was heavily involved in martial arts. My mother was extraordinarily influential in my life and in my philosophical studies, if you will. And so when I came to the fraternity, I joined for a number of reasons, but not least of which was the nascent esotericism that I saw, at least the potential for in the rituals. Of course, I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I saw that what it potentially could be. And after joining and sort of working my way up through the lodge level, I joined in 97. Served as master of my lodge in 2003, and then shortly after that served as the district deputy grand master in my local district. One of the brethren, who's one of our staff members and another dedicated member to the Middle Chamber program, helped put together some of the modules that we teach. Brother Mike Daniels, I worked with him when I was DDGM to try to establish a district level esoteric discussion group. And this was, I think, 2004, maybe 2005. And we had, I don't know, 2 or 3 guys that showed up, a couple for 2 or 3 months in a row. But then it just sort of fizzled out. And, what I took from that was it just wasn't time. The energy wasn't there yet. And, we talk a bit about the history of the program and where it came from as part of the setup for the program in the book. But then there's a group of us that have been friends involved in one lodge in particular, Sophia Lodge. We got to know each other very well. We understood the esoteric nature of the craft.
I also have a background in esotericism that lies outside the craft. But in developing this program, our mantra given to us by Most Worshipful Bradshaw to keep us out of trouble with the Grand Lodge and to keep us within due bounds was stay on Masonry, stay on Masonry, stay on Masonry. And what we knew with bringing our outside Western mystery tradition backgrounds into the craft was that everything that you need to know to discuss esotericism lies within our ritual. It's right there. You don't have to go looking for it somewhere else. And so if you just dive into your ritual, it's all there. It's just veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. We specifically tell you right off the bat at the very beginning of your Masonic journey that what we're telling you has a deeper lying meaning. It's veiled in allegory and it's illustrated by symbols. So we just somehow don't hear that part when we say it, or we don't take the time to dive into what the deeper underlying meanings are that we're telling you right off the bat. So, but we did that because we were interested in it and because we had a background in it, and it was easy for us to be able to see it. And then the challenge was to be able to sell it to the Grand Lodge and then take it to the General Masons and explain it in a way that they could understand it. And just one more follow-up. You mentioned that generally guys with our backgrounds are both older and seem to be more establishment kind of guys. Well, we absolutely both paid our dues in the establishment world. I mean, we've sat on the boards, we've gone to the meetings, we've done the budgets, we've done the charity work, we've all of the things that you have to do in the management world of Masonry. We did those before. Doing those well allows a Mason to set himself up to do something more profound in the craft, which for us was pursuing this esoteric path.
One of the conversations that has been happening in our craft, and I feel like the pandemic in 2020 and continuing to be the public health crisis that we have now, it continues to compound this, is the membership issue. And we have an issue with retention, and also as it's kind of addressed in the recruiting aspect, and that Freemasonry does not recruit members. And everybody talks about different ways to kind of solve this problem. In New York State, we went through more of a slowed down to gradually bring an interested gentleman as a prospect into the craft through what we call our North Star program. You outlined something called the Middle Chamber program. We've mentioned it a couple times here. So what is that, and how does it work, and how has it worked for the benefit of brothers in North Carolina?
There are 4 major modules to this program, and the goal of the program is to teach the allegory and symbolism that lives within the Craft Lodge degree system. So it's really a dive into the allegory and symbolism that we talk about in our degrees. It's that simple. Module 1 is free. It's open to any dues card carrying Freemason. They come to essentially a 3-hour lecture that is lays out the program and what it's going to be. We almost discourage guys from participating, not discourage them, but we reiterate in with no fluff that it's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of reading. There's going to be a lot of sharing. There's going to be a lot of challenging your belief systems. And if this is, for you, great. And if it's not, then don't do it. This is a self-vetting program. At the end of that lecture, the guys are either ravenous to sign up, or they just wasted a half a day, but at least they don't go on to something that they don't know what they're getting into. So we have a great retention rate because that vetting process sets them up for the rest of the program. If they decide they want to do it, they send the Grand Lodge, very important point, it's not run through a bunch of us, it's run through the Grand Lodge, fully sanctioned Grand Lodge program. They call the Grand Lodge office, they send them a payment for a student kit. They're signed up for the program through a process. They receive a student kit that has 5 textbooks and a journal. And then they go through a full day of training on the Entered Apprentice program. And generally we do this in the first quarter is the introductory program. We call it the hook. Second quarter kind of sort of is the Entered Apprentice. Third quarter is all day on Fellowcraft. Fourth quarter is all day on a Master Mason. The quarters don't fall like that always. It depends on the schedule, but they're getting a full day. And then there's a 5th, if they want to, optional advanced course, which is essentially a weekend retreat. We bring in some of the outside authors and do a full immersion, even deeper dive into some real spiritual work in Freemasonry.
We today, as Freemasons, judge our membership based on our recent history. And by recent history, I'll look back, 40, 50 years. And over the last 40 or 50 years, all we have seen is a steady decline in that membership. The reality is that the fraternity's been around far longer than 40 or 50 years. And also the reality is that we had a significant bubble following World War II. And so We talk about it in the book in the first chapter, sort of that membership bubble diluted some aspects of the craft. While it really helped amp up sort of the social and charitable aspects, it diluted that spiritual, more esoteric aspect of the craft, because it takes time and study and a willingness to be open to discussions around what you believe and why you believe it, to really understand yourself, so that the rituals themselves can ultimately work on who you are and making you a better person. Well, I mean, that's our sort of our informal tagline, right? So the membership is actually a two-edged sword. While it, it's a simple metric, it's an easy way to sort of measure maybe the validity of the craft to the outside world, and maybe even to ourselves. It's not the best metric, at least in my opinion, in determining the value of Freemasonry in the community or in our own personal lives. But that's where leadership tends to focus. We point out in the book that really, when we talk about membership, what we're really more in a veiled manner talking about is money. If we didn't have the same budgetary requirements, we may not care as much about the members. Now, certainly there are lodges out there, we know, that struggle to open. They don't have enough members. Well, the reality is they've got enough members, they don't have enough active members. So why aren't they active? It's because they don't find what they want. They don't get the value out of the fraternity that they anticipated or hoped to, and so they just don't participate. Brethren join this craft for a variety of reasons, and we firmly believe that one of those reasons is they have an inner drive to change, to transform, to become more connected with who they truly are, to be more connected with God, to be more connected to their community. And some find that through their social interactions, some find it through the charitable aspects that the fraternity provides. But a lot of us find it through the more contemplative aspects that our ritual and craft provide to us. And that's the part that we lost during that membership bubble. So I kind of talked around it a bit, but I hope I nailed it in a few places.
Yeah, no, you're speaking my language, Most Worshipful. It was one of the questions that I wanted to ask, because it's a theme that I'm hearing a lot throughout my travels and just meeting other brothers and, worshipful masters in the East, is that there's a call to want to get back to basics, is what they keep saying. And I'm like, what do you mean by getting back to basics as a Freemason? And in chapter 1, when I said I was highlighting, sections of the book, this is one where I highlighted it. You began to say the second major problem that exists in Freemasonry is money, and that a lot of the call to action is really a response to just continue business as usual. And I found it very interesting, and one of your illustrations was a call to action to change that model. And how does that improve the craft?
So the way it improves the craft is the brethren who find, at least this is my take, the brethren who find value in the fraternity will be willing to pay for that value. We sell the fraternity cheap, but frankly, what we provide, generally speaking, in most lodge experiences, is about equitable to what's being paid. I mean, you pay, I don't know what dues are in New York, but here in North Carolina, the average dues range in the 85 to 125 per year. And you're not going to get a lot out of that. You're not going to get profound experiences. Typically, you'll make some good friends. You'll give yourself opportunities to do some good charitable work. But there's other parts of the craft that we miss out on because we sell it cheap. And because we sell it cheap, we just don't have the funds, the capability to provide other, more profound experiences. But more than that, it also keeps us, like, I think, on this hamster wheel of, well, if we only had more members, then we can retain a lower due structure, and then we can still pay for this building that we've got, which is in some cases, a white elephant. In other cases, we absolutely have to keep some of these buildings. They're treasures, but more often than not, they're money pits. And so we delude ourselves into thinking the answer is members, when in fact the answer may be sort of going back to the true values of the craft in its original state.
Yeah. So 2 points in this. This is pretty a wide ranging topic here we're on right now. But one is I want to point out in the membership drawdown that Shaun and I both own businesses, and every businessman knows that in apparent disaster or downturns or hardship is opportunity. It's almost a esoteric truth. It's certainly a business truth. I'll tell you a true story. So my dad has a good friend who is like a multimillionaire, and they were on vacation, and when Black Friday hit in like 1986 or 7, I can't remember when that was, and they saw it. They were in a bar on vacation, and they were watching the stock market, and my dad's friend said, "Oh my God, I have lost a fortune." And my dad said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to buy like hell." And he did, because that's the way that businessmen think. This is an opportunity for us. This membership drawdown, MSA finally got their numbers up after we published our book. We're down in the 800,000s now for membership. We're continuing to crash. And nobody knows where this is going to bottom out, but we have not hit the bottom of this membership drawdown now. But this is both a disaster, but at the same time, there is tremendous opportunity here to get back to our basics, which was the other thing that you mentioned in your opening statement. And what that means to me is get back in your doggone ritual. Get back in your ritual. Your ritual has the secret of Masonry. It has the key to unlock, use a Scottish Rite term, all of the things that are going to make the individual Mason become a more, get this, Shaun, noble version of himself, which is the goal, right? We were talking about this yesterday. And so that happens in ritual. You just need to get under the allegory and the symbolism of it. So that's what the getting back to basics is.
Yeah, I echo that thought completely. I was invited to speak at a Brother Bring a Friend night, and I looked into an empty lodge room and was thinking of the days, and I'm sure you were touching on it as well, the days when we had 300 members in a lodge, and active members that would attend a lodge would be in the 100s. Heck, in my mother lodge, I've been told stories that if you wanted to get in line, it went around the door or out the door, around the block, and around the corner. I mean, there was so many that they were starting to create other lodges because there just weren't opportunities for brothers to become the master of their lodge. It was never going to happen in your lifetime. And here we are now standing in this room, and there's 12 guys. And I said, how many men do you know in your life? How many men do you think are over the age of 18 live in this city or this town that we're in? And how many of us are in this room tonight? Maybe we have to get okay with the idea that Freemasonry is not right for every man. And not every man should be a Freemason. And that's okay. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the other part of it, which I'm also witnessing a huge push, and you've mentioned it in your book as well, getting back to the traditional observant style of Freemasonry. And I think that when men are talking about the back to basics and getting back to ritual, that's what they want to get back to, is have a lot of the extra distractions let's say that come with lodge night. Take that out and get back to what you're supposed to be there for. Yeah, the dinners and the social aspects are great, but that really shouldn't be the primary focus of going to lodge night once or twice a month or whenever your lodge meets.
There is something to be said for men needing what Bob Davis would call the mature masculine experience. Men need to be around other men, and we're so disconnected these days because of social media and because of the rise of the family unit in a way that it didn't exist before. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there is a need for men to be around other men who can influence them, and not just drinking beer and, watching football. Nothing against either of those. I like them both. But I like being with my brothers when I have a feeling of importance about what we're doing. When I'm wearing my tuxedo, when we're going to a nice dinner, when we're doing prescribed toasts, there's something that doesn't resonate with every man there, but I think it resonates with a lot of men, and I think it's important that men get back to this shared experience to understand what mature masculinity looks like.
We've talked about on a local level how lodges can shape their culture and their definition and how they practice Freemasonry. I'm going to put the past Grand Master in the hot seat here for a little bit on what can be done on a state level as far as a Grand Lodge. What should we be expecting from them when it comes to leadership, Masonic education, ritual guidelines, and standards? What should be their role?
I may differ a bit from what other Grand Lodge leaders view. Again, my emphasis in the I guess the theme of my year was going to be, it turned out to be COVID, but was going to be more related to how we really, I don't want to say exclude the outside world, but turning inward a bit more and being more philosophical with ourselves. My thought was where most leaders tend to focus programs to sort of promote the fraternity externally, my thought was to promote it internally, not just to get the guys that are already members coming back or to retain, but to affect true change. Because every brother joined this fraternity for a reason. Either they knew someone that they respected and wanted to join because they wanted to be like that guy. They saw something in the charities. They saw something in the social outlet. They saw something in the rituals, something about it intrigued them. And they latched onto it at the beginning. Now, for one reason or another, some stayed and continued and worked on, and others maybe demitted or NPD'd or just, continue to pay but become inactive. I think the reality is, though, that generally we all stopped trying to change ourselves internally. That's where we kind of fell down. The in the mid 1800s and in the 18th century, we didn't have 800,000 Masons in the United States, let alone in the world. I looked at it in North Carolina. In North Carolina in 1850, there were just about 3,000 members. And yet they were some of the most influential men in the state. They worked to improve what they thought the state needed to be, or their community, I'll put it that way. And I think what we've done is we've as leaders, particularly at the state level, and I'm not going to call out North Carolina. I think in North Carolina, most of our leadership's done a very admirable job of this. But I've been to conferences where I hear the speeches given, and I hear the other Grand Masters and Grand Line members talking, and the focus on just trying to get more, like it's just a numbers game. If we can get X number of guys to come and we talk to them and we put X number of petitions out, then we'll retain. And it's just numbers. And it's like, no, guys, the purpose of our fraternity is to change who we are, to be better men. And if we are better, then we will influence the men around us and cause them to want to join. The greatest gift my son has ever given me was asking to become a Freemason because of the type of father he thought I was, because of the men he saw me associate with, men like Ben Wallace, men like Max Sigmund, the Grandmaster just prior to me, and so many others. He saw what we were about. He saw who we were, and he wants to be like that. So he wanted to join the fraternity that he thought would help him become that change. But we've seemed to have lost that. We talk about it, but we don't live it. And so what can we do at the state level? We need to start pushing more to live the life of a Freemason and not just play the numbers game.
The book that we're talking about is The Path to Providence. You can find it at barnesandnoble.com, at walmart.com. We also have the links if you want to just click and buy right from the show links for this podcast episode. Before I let you guys out of here, we got one question left here. And to me, I was really impressed with many of the values that you touch on in the preview that I got to read. And Masonic education is obviously a big one. Ritual proficiency. It's been amazing in travels having conversations with brothers just about ritual. And because in New York State, our expectation is so high for passing proficiency with ritual, guys will look at me and be like, well, where did you hear that? I'm like, it's from the cipher, dude. It's the this comes right from the lesson in the first degree. Like, and I feel like that's part of the experience. Like, how can somebody really enjoy the full and swimming full laps in the swimming pool when they're still stuck on the kid step when it comes to the proficiency aspect? But I also appreciate, in one of the topics we didn't get to in this episode, was you challenge the idea of progressive lines in a lodge, and even like the idea of putting the best leaders in the best position for the best results, which I like that as well. What I want to do is I want to take it home for the Master Mason or just brother who buys a copy of A Path to Providence. What outcome or action are you hoping that they follow or take after reading your book?
Yeah, I want to go first because, one, there's a tradition that the Grand Master always gets to go last. And he also has I know what he's going to say. So I'm going to jump in there, and I'm just going to say, I want to see a call to action. I want to see whether you're in your own Blue Lodge, whether you're on some Grand Lodge committee, whether you're a Grand Line officer. I want to see people get interested in getting out of this mindset of numbers, dollars. And I want to see them start to do something. I don't care what it is, to get us back into our ritual. And you're exactly right about ritual proficiency. We need guys that know the ritual, that the answer is getting back in ritual. Please do something to make that start to happen. And I'll yield to the Grand Master to finish this out.
So Ben touched on one item, but if you buy this book, I hope and I pray that you buy the books that we use in the program. The authors, Chuck Dunning, Bob Davis we're adding his book, In Search of Light, in our next go around. He just published that one. Wilmshurst, Steinmetz, Hurd, the list goes on. McNulty, can't leave out Brother Kirk McNulty. If you read our book, you've got to read those. If you read those, you will have such a better understanding of not only the ritual, but I think yourself. I think you will, if you actually read it, don't just read the words, but bring it into yourself, you will start to see with new eyes every bit of symbolism, every bit of ritual that you watch. And then you have become one of those educated Masons just by reading those books. What we do in the middle chamber is we have the guys that come through the program, we have them read the books, but then that's the main education. The secondary part is the lectures and the discussions that we facilitate from that. That sort of broadens the brethren's minds on what the symbols can mean to them. So what do I want you to do? I want you to buy the other books. I want you to read them. And then I want you to spend some time contemplating how you can change yourself to be a better man, to affect change in your lodge, affect change in your family, affect change in your community.
Right. So each one teach one. He's got this thing with his hand, right? This each one teach one is the concept that, take what you know and teach it to somebody else, because how else are they going to learn? How are we going to teach our brothers if somebody doesn't sit down with a brother, look him in the eye and say, hey, let me tell you about this thing?
Well, this has been the Craftsman Online podcast. Again, I want to thank my guests this week, Ben Wallace and Shaun Bradshaw, for coming on. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate it.
If Masonic education is important to you, you can sign up for our email newsletter at craftsmanonline.com. A reminder that new episodes of the Craftsman Online podcast are available for download every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.